this and you got that, and you gonna murder this one and murder that one. Talking all that bullshit. I'm gonna put it to you like this, yo.
This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me. I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
What is poppin', everybody? And welcome back to another special episode of the Only Friends podcast. Well, you know, it's me and my only friends, which includes, but is not limited to, Senior Hunt. What's poppin', Hunt? How you feeling today?
Doing well. I'm in the captain's chair, so I feel important. You know.
Well, I've told you many of times, man. That's the sidekick chair. You know.
Yeah. Well, now you made me feel less important.
I mean, no, don't worry. What do you mean? You have the number one spot here.
That's
being
true.
my sidekick.
Yeah, that's true. Being your sidekick is pretty much the main reason to be on this podcast.
Obviously, there's nothing else.
Yeah.
What's poppin'? How you feeling? How you feeling about getting what are you doing after the summer?
What am I doing for the summer? Well, you know me. I can't really go outside during summer when I'm in Vegas. So like otherwise, I would be in some trouble. But I might take a little trip out of Vegas here or there, but otherwise I'm just going to be, in the coaching streets, getting a bunch of stuff done that I put off during WSOP,
Sounds good. What's poppin', Landy? How you feeling today?
I have to leave my house today. My table's in the shot. I didn't know if my table was going to be my little table.
I'll fix it for you. Give me one
No,
second.
you're good. Like this coffee, not mine. Not a coffee guy.
You're
This
a ghost guy.
in there. This in there. I'm leaving the house. I had to buy pants to go to the Venetian later today for the meetup game. Yeah.
You were actually told to buy pants?
No, I wasn't told to buy pants. I was told to dress nice, and dressing nice is not something that's normally on the schedule for me.
Okay.
So I was like, you know what?
I was going to say, you look a little dressed up,
Yeah, it's because I really love the podcast. Today was going to be the day where no one else is here besides us three.
Berkey's away, and you just decided
Matt's
to dress
away. I will play with my outfit here today.
up. You looking forward to the new Venetian room tonight?
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Be there for a while. I think the meetup game stuff starts at 3, and then I don't know if it ends at 12 a.m.
I thought
So,
it started at 6.
so hold on, guys. So the meetup game starts at 4 today for anybody that's Sapphire or above in their rewards program. And then at 6, it's open to the public.
I see.
Yeah. I'm really excited about this. It's going to be fun. This is what I think it's 1325.
Yeah.
It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can get some straddles going, some bomb pots, some stand-up game. We got to get the party started.
It's not often you get to actually open a new poker room.
I know.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah.
That is pretty dope. I'm pretty excited about this.
It's 1, 3, 2, 3, and 2, 5.
1, 3, 2, 3, and 2, 5?
Yeah.
Sweet.
This is like the poker equivalent to when the Mirage shut down and everyone went there to go gamble because they were giving away millions of dollars. But this is like the poker version where something opens and it's like, oh, new room, who dis,
I heard that Mirage time was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
kept seeing tweets about it, thousands of people there.
it's kind of funny when you think about it as real people, $10 million or whatever it was that they had to get away for promotions is a lot.
Yeah.
But as a multi-billion-dollar company, it's like, oh, let them feed. It's like feeding the ducks at the lake,
Let them eat.
Yeah, everyone gets a little piece.
You know what I mean?
Throw out some breadcrumbs to the masses.
Yeah.
So we got an exciting show
A
today.
small loan of $10 million.
We are going to be talking about GTO Wizard and
Yes.
their new feature that they just dropped. Guap, I believe we have a clip that we can just jump right into.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about ICM and chip EV. Most tournament players study with chip EV solutions. A chip EV strategy is just one that aims to accumulate as many chips as possible, ignoring the value of survival. ICM strategies, on the other hand, use the independent chip model to consider the payout implications of the entire tournament. ICM is designed to maximize the actual cash value of your strategy, which leads to dramatically different GTO solutions. Here's why this is a game changer. It's first worth asking, how much does ICM impact your profitability in post-flop spots compared to playing chip EV? Well, a lot. We benchmarked the performance of playing chip EV against ICM-aware players at various stages of a 1,000-player tournament. In an innocuous 20 big blind single raise pot, playing chip EV loses upwards of 10% of your initial buy-in every single time you see a flop. For 3-bet pots, it's even worse. The losses can exceed up to 30% of your buy-in on average. Now keep in mind, these figures only account for the flop exploitability of your strategy. They would be even worse if we measured turns and rivers as well. We'll put a link to the benchmarks in the description if you'd like to learn more. In a previous video, we benched how well ChipEV performs pre-flop, and let's just say it gets crushed pretty badly. Whether you're looking at pre-flop or post-flop, the importance of playing ICM in the later stages of tournaments cannot be overstated. Now, traditionally...
So, Wizard has dropped a new feature. It is post-flop AI for ICM. And I was thinking about this. I learned tournaments backwards. So I learned from final table ICM to splashy chip EV.
Right.
And I think I'm very grateful for that. What can you explain more about this new feature that just got dropped?
Sure. Yeah. So essentially, what the previous tools that we had on Wizard, they have a whole bunch of pre-flop, pre-solved ICM solutions. But as soon as you get to a flop, as soon as you want to run a sim using those ranges, you didn't previously have the ability to actually incorporate ICM into the post-flop calculation. You just had to run chip EV, which isn't really very realistic because there's not really a situation where you're going to play an ICM range pre-flop and then you're going to play chip EV post-flop. Because if you're playing ICM to begin with, why would you suddenly switch to chip EV on the flop, right? So now what we have is the ability to actually incorporate ICM into the post-flop calculation. So it's the ability for the AI algorithm essentially to use the ICM mathematical model to actually calculate the solution. Every function that was available with chip EV is still available with ICM. So you can run sims where you allow the AI to sort of dynamically choose what sizing is the best single sizing. You can run a whole bunch of sizings. There's a whole whole suite of things that you can do, essentially.
Okay. Let me ask you a quick question. How was this done previously, and how would you have done it?
The main way that you could do ICM sims previously was, there was two things. It really all depended on PO Solver for the most part, because they did have the ability to use ICM in PO, but you could only do it for the final two tables, or if you wanted to do it earlier in the tournament, you could run a calculation in HRC and then import that into PO and then run it post-flop. But it's a very long-winded process, and nobody really ever felt that good about the fact that it took such a long time to get like good insights into like how am I supposed to play around the bubble or something like that. So
how long did this take to run something like that?
It depends on how good your computer is, but for me, like, the HRC sim would usually be the part that takes longer, because when you're running an HRC sim, you have to run a pre-flop sim, and usually if you want to run it accurately at reasonable depth, that's going to take at least a few hours, maybe a couple of days if you're running a complex one, and then you have to import the ranges into PO and run the PO sim, which might not take that long, but depending on how complex it is, it might take a couple hours. So like it was a very boring and long process to get good post-flop ICM insights until, a couple days ago. And now it's like 5 seconds.
Does this completely make Hold'em resource obsolete?
No, because you still have to use it to run your pre-flop ICM spots. So if you're running a final table spot, realistically, to get like precise ranges instead of just using the range blueprints that you have on Wizard. If you add a final table and you want to run a spot for the specific payout structure and stack distribution that you have, you still have to run that spot on HRC. But now you can take the ranges, like move them into Wizard or copy them into Wizard, just copy and paste instead of actually like importing in a more complicated way. And then you can just run it in 5 seconds with ICM. So it's definitely a lot faster now.
Interesting. What type of so I've seen a couple of tweets out there saying that the end is near. I think Pat's put out a tweet and stuff like that.
The Doomers are out in force.
Doomers are out. What do you think this has on, what type of change will this have on like the landscape of the game?
I think just like anything else where it's a big leap forward in technology, I mean, it's obvious that we have to like take safeguards to make sure that people don't cheat using this, right? Like that's, it's always something people are concerned about. It's not something I consider myself an expert in, so I don't have that much opinion about like what we should do or whatever. But yeah, people are going to try to use this to cheat, and we should do whatever we can to avoid that. In terms of the stuff that I'm more concerned with, which is, how are people going to study? How are people going to learn? It's going to mean that we have a lot more different avenues through which we can sort of explore how complex tournament poker really is, right? We now have the ability to look at a certain spot and say, well, we're not just kind of making assumptions about how post-flop ICM should play out, but we actually have the ability to really quickly test it, to understand things like what are the trends in what bet sizes get used and don't get used when you're looking at ICM, and how does it compare to chip EV, all sorts of stuff like that. There's a lot of studying you can do with this stuff, and obviously as someone who studies a lot and coaches a lot, that's obviously exciting for me.
Let me read this tweet real quick from Pads. Okay. He says, the ironic thing is these lookup tools are bad for pros and good for amateurs, but the public perception is the opposite. PO Solver was tough to use, tough to find, and tough to navigate without a big marketing budget. GTO Wizard is super easy to use, super easy to cheat with, super easy to use in-game or immediately before, after decisions, and literally sponsors the WSOP. The optics of pros using it on the rail is bad, but it's closed the gap between amateurs and pros and helped cheats cheat more efficiently, taking directly from pros' bottom line. What do you guys think about this? I'm going to go to you, Len. What do you...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true. And there's a lot of points to be made there where study prior was kind of gatekept through the use of software. Like looking at PO Solver and looking at HRC definitely takes a learning curve to get really good at. And to a degree, like the lookup tools and databases make it easier to pick up the most amount of EV from learning the spot. And something like ICM Post now being a thing is going to help people get better at final tables quicker, but it'll also help, call it, the pros get better as well. What does end up happening is the pros can only get so much better, but like the people that are not that great or going from break even to winning is a much higher gap there by using these tools and lookups.
This is actually very similar to you playing Perkins heads up when you were giving him big blinds, because like when you were studying, there's only so much better you could get.
Yeah,
but he could have got exponentially
he
better.
can go from being a loser to a winner, and like reasonable-ish winner, and then I can go from winning to only winning so much. So there's definitely a cap there. So it's definitely this in between where someone that loves to use these tools as is, and like I like the tools, but at the same time I know that I'm not using them in game and doing things in like a negative way. But there is like the argument that you still need HRC for preflop, but looking at ranges for FT and then using those as baselines definitely helps good players that know how to use tools do bad things.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the main thing that is kind of important to a lot of these narratives about RTA and cheating and things like that is that we don't have any numbers or data about how much cheating is happening. So all of our assumptions about how much cheating is happening are based on word of mouth. They're based on, how many incidences there are of people getting caught. And of course, like the biggest problem is that when someone's cheating and not getting caught, you never find out about it. So there's no way of knowing how many people are not getting caught, right?
Sure.
But what hasn't happened yet is anybody putting out some kind of like Pads talks about how easy it is to use Wizard to cheat, right? I would love to see him or somebody prove that it's that easy. Like, can they make a video of themselves cheating online using Wizard and not getting caught, or like just do it to prove that it's that easy and that Wizard cannot detect it? Because if that's the case, we should be very alarmed. But as it stands, there's a lot of people out there saying how easy it is to use Wizard to cheat, and that that there are all these people doing it, and it's so easy to do it and things like that. But I don't really see a lot of like evidence that that's the case, and I don't see dozens of people here and there getting like banned from sites because the site has proven that they're cheating, or like there just doesn't seem to be the
that's one thing that we will never know because the sites don't
Oh,
share
that's
any
true.
of that
You're right.
information
Yeah.
with us.
I guess all I'm really saying is that the scale of people's reaction to the problem, we don't know yet how correlated to the size of the problem it actually is. Like, we don't know yet whether people are massively overreacting to a small problem or whether it actually is a really gigantic problem. And I think that I've always like struggled to know exactly how to react to a lot of these cheating scandals because it's so easy for one instance of something to get like massively blown up into like, oh shit, there's suddenly this massive problem, right? And I think that people very easily hone in on Wizard as like, this is a tool that anybody can use to cheat, when I don't really know if there's that much like evidence out there that all these people are sitting there online using Wizard constantly to cheat without getting caught, because I know Wizard has mechanisms for tracking who's using it to try to cheat.
So I was about to say this. A few months ago, we've had a couple Wizard cheating scandals and or people using Wizard to cheat, and they introduced fair check, fair play. And is this going to be part of that? I'm assuming. I'm assuming sounds like they already got ahead of the problem to me. That's the thing.
That's the thing. I assume it is. You know, I am not involved at all or privy to any of their efforts that are made to track cheaters. That's a whole different, you know, it's very much above my pay grade as a coach. But I don't see any reason why this would somehow be excluded. And I think that I definitely do know that they have, you know, like you say, they have the fair play check. They have methods that are put in place to make sure that at the very, very least, it is entirely like they've made it easy for someone to, if you believe that, you know, you've been cheated, you can check, is someone looking up the same spot that you were in at the same time, etc. You know, and I think to my mind at least, like, I think that if you do use Wizard to cheat, the chances of getting caught, it seems to be relatively high because we've already seen people get caught, right? So I think that.
Well, again, we don't know if it's relatively high just because of like that's just a small.
What I mean is people have been caught, right?
Yes,
people have been caught, and so if there are at least some people that are getting caught, it's really hard to know what the number is of people who are doing it without getting caught. But I don't see an easy method that someone could do this without getting caught based on, you know, how the fair play check works. It's like if you're looking up a hand at the same time as you played a hand, you know, it's hard to see how you can get around that. You can do it, but then you'll get caught afterwards, right? And obviously what we want a method in place where people can't do it to begin with.
Of course.
But that's really hard with any form of cheating, right?
Excuse me, is it naive to think that there's a really easy fix to this and just putting a 60-second delay on just running?
Well, no, the problem with doing that is if they put a 60-second delay on it, it's going to be a competitor that puts a 5-second delay. Like, no matter what, like the product is going to come to market.
So they'll lose market share by not.
Exactly.
Okay.
In my opinion, at least.
Well, I think what will end up happening is other sites and tools like this are coming out with things very similar. So they'll have a head start in having this program be available, but then when the other companies catch up, then the delay will disappear so quick, as the other companies would then say, hey, like, they're using 60 seconds, we're using 50.
Right.
And they're like,
exactly.
all right, now it's just going to be
and so
zero.
It's the way I see it is like, just like with a lot of technology, and with, you know, with the current sort of AI developments and everything, like, it becomes an arms race. You know, it becomes like a bunch of different companies are striving to get the tech done first, right? And in this case, Wizard has been first in multiple different instances.
Yes.
Now, in terms of, you know, is it possible or is it plausible to, you know, put the genie back in the bottle and go back to a time when none of this stuff existed? It's obvious that it's not, right? And the question also becomes, like, if Wizard didn't do this, would somebody else do it? You know, if we you know, suddenly found a way that, you know, like if Wizard just went away, right? If Wizard went away and there was no way for anybody to use Wizard to cheat, would we then suddenly be in a cheating-free environment? Well, someone else would come along, do the same thing that Wizard did.
The answer
and
is-
this problem would be the same, right?
The answer is absolutely not.
Right, exactly.
You know, it's
So
just-
the way I see it is that it all comes down to the methodology of how you catch cheaters, much more so than trying to stop them in the first place, because that's really how most of society works when it comes to punitive things, right? Like, if you think about the law, like, you can't always prevent someone from killing a person, but the whole idea is they don't do it because they know they'll probably get caught if they do, right?
Yep.
And it's the same with any rule in any situation. Like, actually physically preventing someone from breaking a rule is usually not very plausible, but catching them doing it and the fear of them being caught doing it is usually enough to deter them. And as long as we make sure we catch people and we have methodologies to catch people, I think we'll be all right in the long term.
I think when it comes to the feedback from Patrick, and then like my stance is probably more similar to his. And for sure, I think that online is a dying game, and we've known this for a while.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
When it comes to like ICM things, and then I'm sure at some point, if Wizard gets this stuff done, they'll get customizable, like instant pre-flop stuff as well. So you can like input the stacks, input the anti-structure, and then the payouts of your exact spot, which will give you some fast pre-flop ranges. ICM, as we saw from the video, gives you more dollars in relation to playing chip EV. So now having like the access to potentially use perfect pre-flop plus post-flop strategies in situations where you're playing one-off spots over and over again. So you don't need to know the global strategies. You don't need to know anything except how to plug the things into the computer. And that in itself is a relatively scary predicament, because now you're getting into, is this person cheating or are they just that good? Especially when you start looking at higher stake stuff and things along those lines.
Yeah, that's a scary possibility. One interesting thing that came to my mind last night thinking about this was I was watching the pod you guys did the other day with Scott Seaver, and you know, I thought it was really great to hear Scott talking about how the way he sees poker as this very pure game where it's like, it's very emotional and all these things, right? And on some level, I think that you could make some kind of an argument that in the long term, when these kinds of study tools are more accessible and when everybody, you know, rec players included, have the ability to actually study these tools, I'm not obviously saying that, you know, people should just be given ranges in game, but like the more availability there is of people being able to study without needing, you know, to rent a server to run thousands of PO sims and things like that, I actually think that on some level it brings it a bit closer to a level playing field where when you're actually sitting in a live tournament now, everybody has the availability to study. And if you know that everybody is going to be a little bit more precise, or everybody kind of has a bit of an understanding of what the ranges are and things like that, maybe it does highlight that live skill set that Scott was talking about of just understanding in this particular spot emotionally, is this guy going to go for this bluff and things like that, you know? So I think there's still an argument to be made that a level playing field for studying, and you know, not putting sims behind almost like a paywall of you need to rent a server, you need to, you know, have computing resources available and things like that. There's an argument that it brings poker a little bit more in line with this kind of pure game where everybody starts from the same point, you know?
I agree. I think this lifts the bottom up. That's the way I put it. I think the way you said it, like, it gives everybody an even playing ground some ways, because this has been accessible to pros for a very long time.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you could have done this years ago, and now it's just for a couple bucks you can figure it out.
Well, there's a difference in the sense of like having the answers versus having the baselines. You know, because the way people make money in poker is through studying to a degree, or just like playing a ton. But if we're agreeing that the machine is called like the highest overlord that wins the most money, and now you get the answers from those things in real time versus having abstractions like it, it's a little bit difficult. And
But do you ever get the actions like real time?
What do you
Like,
mean?
you don't, like, unless you're cheating, you don't get it real time.
I think this is what I think we're talking about slightly different things. Like Landon's talking a bit more about RTA usage, and I'm talking a bit more about studying, you know, like, so like, I think we're all on the same page that RTA is like, nobody should ever be allowed to use this in real time, right? I think we're all very much in agreement that, the cheating side of it, the getting people access to this stuff in real time is something we should always avoid.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure they wouldn't roll this out without their fair play check and hopefully some more other security measures in there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's weird because cheating has like always been available, like you're saying, in the form of like database lookup. Like you won't have like perfect answers, but even if you did, you could probably like 2 tables small, have all the spots you want run to a degree, and it's not gonna be perfect, but like you can go into Pio after a script and then like pull up a board. You know,
the crazy part is cheating was only available to pros at this time.
That's true.
Now it's available to the masses.
That's the
that's pretty sick. Like that's a pretty sick thought.
We're democratizing the cheating process. You know,
we gotta live to bottom up, man.
We're bringing cheating to the masses. We're letting let the people cheat. You know, that's what we're doing.
Yeah,
it's true though. We're like, you can kind of be anybody at this point and know what poker is and how Wizard works to get really good at not just like cheating as a whole, and like we think that this leads to making money. But also like real-time active studying, you know, because especially in spots like final tables and things where there's a lot of money on the line, you can take those things that you learn in the moment to then like replicate in other sort of spots you have, not only online, but like live poker as well, where it's like, oh yeah, I remember I was deep in this tournament and then my range looked like this because I didn't know the answer then, but using a lookup tool, it kind of helped me out.
Yeah.
Which is definitely more of like an active, engaging kind of studying versus just like playing the trainer over and over again and then trying to recall from memory.
Yeah.
Do you guys think this is? I hate this topic and I speak about it a bunch on Twitter. But do you guys think this is more of a reason to ban cell phones from final tables? And I'm only saying final tables.
Cell phones for the people that are playing?
Yes.
I think so. I think that's valid. I think at that point, like it's a very controlled environment and you can see who's on there, like who's doing what. And it is kind of like annoying, you know, if you're like not playing professionally, like don't have other people on the rail for some big spots or whatever. But I do think that there's some precautions should be taken place if we're worried about technology, as you can do everything you can on a computer from a phone. Yeah. It's very easy to remote PC. It's very easy to text your friends that do have a PC. Like you can do a bunch of stuff from a phone.
Yeah, I think especially just for the optics of what televised final tables look like and how it appears, and now that people are kind of aware that there's this concept of someone being able to have a solver on their phone. I think the more we see people at televised final tables taking out their phone during the final table, I think it's to some extent maybe it worries rec players a little bit. So I certainly think there's an argument for that at final tables.
I don't even think it needs to be televised FTs either.
All final tables.
Yeah, just like you're playing final tables for like a reasonable amount of money. Yeah. Like it's better for everyone involved that no one has access to something that can help you in real time.
Yeah, that's
all right. You hear that, all you people on Twitter that want your cell phone, that don't want your cell phones in the game? We've come to an agreement. Just final tables.
I think final tables is valid. Like it's just worth so much money. It's easy to control. Somebody's on their phone. Like not that you don't know what they're doing or like trying to monitor them or whatever, but it's safer for the environment to not have access to technology at the table. Like on breaks, everyone has the same amount of time. Do what you want.
I think that's totally fair. Just give people their phones back on breaks. Like just have somewhere next to the table that they can put them, and
and then for like these televised ones, I think it's reasonable for players for sure to not have the phones and stuff or like access to them. Yeah. Like during WPT final tables for stuff they televised, like all of our phones got taken and like put in a box. Yeah. It's like once you're done, like once you either bust the tournament or it's over, you get your phone back.
Yeah.
And then on breaks, your friends have their phones in the stands. You go talk to your friends, do whatever you want.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. I think for smaller final tables, giving people the phones back on the breaks is probably good. But like for the televised stuff, I can totally understand. Just the whole time, it's like you give us your phone, and then when you bust, you can have it back. I think that's totally fine.
Absolutely. All right, we're getting a little off course here. We are going to run through how to use this Postflop ICM on GTO Wizard, and then we're going to get into it a little in the muck. Yeah. So if you don't mind setting that up for us,
sure. Yeah, I can do that. So I think we can just dive right in with the hand that Landon kindly provided for us.
Okay, pause. Guapo, roll that shit.
Oh, you can't sneak it. You can't sneak it.
I snuck it up on him.
Listen, I did that on purpose.
So I'll just while Guapo gets that ready, I'll give an intro to how the functionality.
You can just roll me in the muck. It's okay. I was just fucking with Guapo.
Okay.
No, you're good. Just run it.
Oh, just run. Oh, I thought you said roll. You said roll the in the muck. I thought you meant him. Okay.
I knew Guapo wasn't going to be ready for that.
Right, okay. Never mind. So basically, if you're familiar with GTO Wizard AI, this is kind of the standard interface that you would have seen up until now. You've got where you put in the ranges, you put in the stacks and everything, you put in the bet sizes and the tree that you want to use. We'll stick with the automatic tree for now. Now what you have is you have this little tab here where it says equity model. And if I hit ICM, it then allows me to basically input the payout structure, to input, the basic details of the hand, the stacks, the other stacks that are at the table or the other stacks that are in play. And we won't run this with ICM yet because I want to show the difference between the chip EV and the ICM versions. But basically, all the functionality is exactly the same as it would be for any other sim that you were previously running with Wizard AI. So if you've already used it, the process isn't really going to be any different. And if I hit this, if I hit the chip EV button and we just run this sim with chip EV, then we'll see that this is a spot that Landon played from a final table, cutoff versus button. He was the chip leader. He opens, the button calls. We go to a flop of king, queen, 8, all clubs. And in the basic chip EV version of this sim, this is with ICM pre-flop ranges, but with chip EV on the flop, Landon's only supposed to c-bet quarter pot 11% of the time because he has a super wide range and the player calling has a pretty tight range, right? So it's actually not a very good spot for Landon. He doesn't really have the ability to be particularly aggressive here. But this is where we add the ICM. Maybe now is when you roll the in the muck thing. Are you ready for it? No, you're still not ready. Okay, never mind.
It's off.
All right, so forget it then. Fuck the intro for in the muck. Doesn't matter. All right. So if we just hit the ICM button, I can just bring up a kind of a basic blueprint tournament structure from Wizard here. It doesn't have to be the exact tournament structure. We've got the correct stacks for the spot that Landon was actually in. We've got the other stacks for the tournament. I've put them in here. So 7 other players, 9-handed final table. We do have the option to define based on the average stack if we're running the sim for earlier in the tournament, but we're just going to define it manually for now. And we're going to keep the game tree the same and everything. So I'm just going to hit create solution. And immediately we're going to see Landon's c-bet frequency change to 49%, right?
So it doubled.
So it quadrupled. It went from 11%.
Oh, that's right. It was 25% was the size. Sorry.
25, yeah, 20 quarter pot is the size basically that it likes here. But it went from basically checking his entire range with chip EV to now c-betting about half the time with ICM. And this
with impositions range being a little bit stronger, I'm sure.
Well, impositions range is the same. I ran the chip EV sim, I ran with ICM ranges.
Gotcha.
Can you do me a favor and break that down as to why?
Sure. So what it basically amounts to is that because Landon is the chip leader here and the button is basically the second place stack, the button has a pretty big incentive to not be playing a big pot against Landon. The button has a pretty high risk premium against Landon here, actually 17% risk premium. So that's a really high risk premium here. And that basically means that every decision the button is going to have to make against Landon, he's going to have to fold slightly more. So he's going to have, the bigger the pot gets, the more he's going to have to, be very conservative with his range. And so even though Landon's pre-flop range is really wide here, and they get to a flop with Landon, not having very many good hands because of how wide he's opening in the cutoff, the presence of ICM here, the fact that the button has to, not necessarily just play a normal chip EV strategy on the flop, means Landon gets to c-bet a lot more. And you can see that there's just a lot more hands here that are wanting to c-bet at a decent frequency. And there's quite a few hands that are favoring c-betting at a pretty high rate here, right? There's a lot of hands that are more than 50% if we just highlight the bet. A lot of his strongest stuff is basically pure betting. A lot of like Jack 10, Ace Jack, Ace 10, like a lot of draws are pure betting. Most of his King X is betting at a pretty high rate. And then the only stuff that really wants to check a lot is going to be like pocket 7s and below. A lot of Ace High that just has like a tiny bit of showdown, but not really any kind of draw or anything like that on this monotone flop. So it's a surprisingly high betting frequency considering how wide Landon's range is. And that's just a simple product of the presence of ICM here. So it definitely becomes a very different spot when you add final table ICM to the equation.
Right.
And if we were able to switch the stacks, let's say, let me try a little experiment here, right?
Okay.
If we say we've got these 2 short stacks in the tournament here, we've got a 16 and a 17 big blind stack. If I just change one of these stacks. If I change that 16 big blind stack, so now instead of 16 big blinds, they have 4 big blinds, right? So there's a very short stack in the tournament. Let's see what effect that has. I expect it will have at least some effect here because it's going to increase the risk premium on the button, and that's going to probably change Landon's strategy to some degree.
When you say risk premium, what exactly do you mean?
Oh, it's gone down. That's interesting. That's really interesting. So risk premium basically refers to the additional margin of equity that you need in an ICM spot to justify investing chips. Okay. So, or theoretically, it's all about risking your stack, but even for risking a small amount of chips, there's a small risk premium placed on you. So, because losing chips is more damaging than the benefit of winning chips in any ICM spot, there's always a risk premium on you, and the more ICM pressure there is, the higher that risk premium is going to be. So, in this case, what's actually happened is we created a really short stack, and the risk premium on the button went up. And the risk premium on Landon kind of went up as well a little bit, even though Landon's already the chip leader. And it actually, I'm guessing, just by virtue of the slightly higher risk premium on Landon, it actually made Landon slightly less aggressive here.
That's weird.
It's weird, but it's like these are the unpredictable effects that are created with ICM sometimes, right? If I go back to the previous version that we had, we put a 16 big blind stack in there, we'll probably get that same 49% c-bet frequency.
Because my original thought is like, all right, if you put a 4 big blind stack in there, then the risk premium for the button's going to be higher, so we should be betting more, correct?
That's
my original thought.
Usually you would think that, but my guess is that what's actually happening is that
it funnels them pre-flop.
Well, we didn't actually change the pre-flop ranges. We should have, because certainly with a higher risk premium, the button is going to be tighter pre-flop.
Yeah.
But my sort of very brief guess of what would be happening is that when there's a micro stack, when Landon checks here, it's going to go check more often than when there's no micro stack. Mm-hmm. I should check that. So when Landon checks here with no micro stack, he faces 40%, 27% of the time, right? With a micro stack, let's see how that actually changes. I expect
goes down.
It's going to go check more often.
Wow.
So Landon C betting less. Okay, so it has what's happened is the button is now, instead of betting 40%, they're betting quarter pot. So the button's betting smaller, and they're betting slightly more often. But the overall amount of money the button's going to be putting into the pot facing a check is pretty much about the same or maybe a little bit less. So there's certain hands in Landon's range that were previously like bluffing to try to get a bit more fold equity that are now maybe a bit more happy to just check because they're going to get slightly more opportunity to potentially show down.
Okay.
I haven't experimented a lot with like switching around the stacks and seeing how one sim changes like this. This is the first time I've done this, so I would have to dig in a lot deeper to kind of figure out exactly why Landon's actually checking more. But the bottom line here is that adding ICM to the sim immediately made Landon bet a lot more than what the chip EV version would do. And what you'll also see is that when Landon bets quarter pot here, the button is almost prevented from raising. Like they're only able to raise like a tiny frequency here. Even though they clearly have a range that has a lot of suited hands in it and has a lot of flushes, they are raising quarter pot like 5% of the time. And this is actually something you see quite a bit in ICM sims, that when a certain player is under a lot of ICM pressure, they really don't get to raise the flop very much. Mm-hmm. And the check raising frequencies will go down a lot. You'll see a lot of weird stuff like playing super low frequency check raise, and then after you check call, if the flop is like if the turn is like a safe turn card, then they'll like donk bet and things like that. It gets really confusing sometimes. But basically, the in position player is not really allowed to raise much here at all. Landon's exact hand in this spot, I believe you had Ace Jack, right? You had
Ace Jack, Jack of Clubs.
Ace Jack, Jack of Clubs. So Landon's exact hand here is basically looks like it is just mixing between checks and bets. If we want to see the value of these decisions in actual dollars, we can do that because they have the ability to view it in dollar EV right there.
Nice.
Now, this is not relative to the actual payouts of the tournament because we just used a blueprint payout structure. Mm-hmm. But you can see the EVs of all the different hands represented in dollars here. Ace Jack with the Jack of Clubs is making about almost $400 at this final table. And you can see having a club is super valuable in dollar value here, because you make $400 when you have a club, you make 500 plus when you have the ace of clubs. When you have ace jack no club, you make like $100.
Just for reference, what was first in this tournament? That
in
like
this
12K. Oh,
no, in the sim.
in the payout structure, it's
Yeah.
first is like 30K.
Okay.
Because it's 1,000 runners, $100 buy-in, I think. So cut that in half for the tournament Landon was actually playing. So like 15K for first. Like imagine that maybe ace jack of clubs is making like $200 here, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a pretty valuable decision. Obviously, whether or not you choose to c-bet or not here. If we compare the EVs in dollars, you can see that every hand is kind of mixing a little bit, which is why everything looks white here. Like there's just not really massive differences in EV one way or the other. But you can see that there's, we're looking at a few cents, a couple dollars here and there for different hands. So once you're dealing with larger numbers here, you do start to see just a small variation in what the EVs actually are. And of course, the absolute nuts here, like the very top end of Landon's range, is going to be making a huge amount. Ace jack of clubs is making $1,100, and there's about a not $3, sorry, like $9 difference between betting and checking here. So we're just betting our strong hands at a very high rate here, or at least a lot.
That's interesting that ace jack with the jack of clubs is making 500, and ace jack of clubs is making 1,100.
Well, let's go back. I just want to make sure I got that right. EV here. So ace jack of clubs is making, so ace of diamonds, jack of clubs is making like 384-ish, and ace jack of clubs is making 1,100. So it's about the nut flush is making 3 times, or almost like 2.7x what ace jack offsuit one club is making here, which is kind of what you'd expect, I guess. But yeah, having a high club is obviously a pretty good hand here.
Yeah.
So looking back at the hand history, tell me what your action was on the flop here, Landon.
It was just 25 and he called.
Okay, so you bet 25, he calls. All right. And get to the turn. What was the turn card?
Let me go. 3 of spades.
3 of spades. All right. So he's got a relatively condensed range for continuing, but he still has to call with like a lot of, pocket pair with a single club. And the sim wants Landon to bet 2/3 pot here at, decent frequency, 40% of the time, but not super high frequency. How does this correlate, Landon, to the strategy that you probably would have been actually implementing here?
Yeah, my turn shot would have been 67 or check with not that many bets, just because my betting frequency on flop is so high.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just betting a ton of stuff and have a lot of garbage. After I bet quarter, he's just going to have a lot of hands that are close and like going to auto fold, and his range is tighter than mine because he's not incentivized to play hands pre. He's still going to be wide relatively, just because I'm not just going to start rifling chips in against him, and he does have position on me as the chip leader who gets to open wide.
Sure.
So he's going to get to play a lot of flats more than you might think, just because it's 1 versus 2, where we're at a stack depth where I can't just leverage his stack with impunity, because if he just has a good hand and stations me down, he's now chip leader and I'm in a really shitty spot.
Right, exactly. And this is also part of the reason why the 2/3 sizing is used, despite the fact this is a huge brick turn. It's not going to be a spot where you get to do a lot of overbetting, because you're still up against a range that contains some flushes, some strong hands. It's an example of a brick turn where you can be slightly polar with this 2/3 size, but not super polar, right? You don't get to just blast off here.
Yeah, I'm risking a lot to funnel money in against his range as well, because I might have the best hand, even if I have a hand like, call it ace of clubs king, but I'm just risking so much where when he actually just has a flush, it's hard to get those chips back later.
Right. Yeah. And what's really interesting about the bluffs that are being used here is it's actually it's pretty intuitive, to be honest, because you've got a lot of high card club hands. You've got a lot, the ace of clubs, ace X jack of clubs is very high frequency. A lot of ace high with a club here, like ace 7, etc., ace 6 and below with the ace of clubs, or really with any clubs being used a lot. A lot of jack 10, a lot of 10-9 or jack 9 off with a club. A lot of 8x, so a weak 8 is a very good bluff here, because you block presumably the set of 8s. You block the set of 8s, which is one of villain's best hands. And then you've got some low pocket pairs with a club and a tiny bit of like the absolute bottom of your range, like the complete dust, like 5 high, no. Oh, actually, oh, wait, that's a 3. Okay. So I guess we're blocking a turn set of 3s. I guess that's why these hands are choosing to continue. So in
Landon
fact,
gets so excited when he sees that purple on the deuces.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, he just loves to rifle that one
loves
off.
to rifle the deuces. Deuces with a club. It's a fun one to rifle off. Absolutely. So in game, what did we go for here? Did we
I went for check.
You went for check.
I wasn't
Okay.
sure on like the frequency of bet check, and it looks like it's just mostly gonna bet because we decided on flop we were gonna bet. Wasn't sure in between like how strong his range was gonna be versus playing check call with like flush draw plus gutter plus over.
Yeah.
So just kind of went with check, but I wasn't sure if that was correct or not.
Yeah, seems like it prefers the bet here. There is a tiny bit of mixing checks here, but I think it looks like the blocking the high club, blocking those flushes is super important ICM wise here because you just get so many folds.
We just get folds from like pairs that have to float first quarter, like 9s, like
Right.
6s, stuff like that we still do well against if we get called.
Yeah.
And the Jack of Clubs is obviously just a really good card.
Right, and again, this is another spot here where villain basically just never gets to raise the turn. Right, we get to barrel 2/3, and there's nothing in villain's range that can withstand raising the turn here. Interestingly, if we look at the blockers tab, we can get a sense of what kinds of cards we want to have in our hand to get max fold equity, and I would expect this is one of the reasons why that Ace X Jack of Clubs is the best or one of the best cards for us to bet. If you look at the 10 of clubs, Jack of clubs, obviously a king is top pair, so we can ignore that. But any 10, Jack, or Ace of clubs, it's going to increase villain's fold frequency to our turn bet by about 3 or 4%, which is a huge margin there. And getting 3 or 4% more folds in an ICM spot where it serves to just increase your chip lead here, that's obviously super valuable. So we do go with check. Does villain bet here?
He checks.
Oh, he checks. Okay, so it goes check, check. Villain's supposed to bet 40% of pot about 40% of the time. So, they're not able to go super aggro. Villain checks behind, and what was the river?
Queen of Hearts.
Queen of Hearts. Okay. This is a very interesting river. Talk me through what your process is going to look like on this river.
Yeah, bad river. He's going to call flop with a lot of Queen X hands and never invest money on the turn. So, bad card for me, good card for him. I was just going to play block or like some custom in-game thoughts with like if I have some King X here, like King Jack, no suit, maybe go for like, even that feels too thin to go pretty big with. So I probably would have stuck with block. If I had like perfect combo, maybe like King Jack off Jack of clubs, I'd go like 67%. But for the most part, I'd be very scared of this card.
Sure. Yeah, it does seem like a pretty scary card. Sim basically wants to just go block. It doesn't jam at all. If we give you like a 3/4 size or something else that's available in there, let's see if it uses that at all. There's a little bit of 3/4 with your Queen X. A lot of your Queen X wants to get a little bit more value, but for the most part, yeah, block size is what it comes with, but it doesn't like blocking the combo that we actually have here. In game, did you check?
Yeah, I checked.
Okay, yeah. So we check with that combo, which obviously seems very logical. We don't really need to bluff with ace high there.
You bet like whatever size, like half pot or whatever.
Okay. So yeah, he basically only wants to bet 67 here. Even though it's a spot where, I don't want to go back and rerun the whole sim with chip EV, but I would expect that villain would probably want to go with a bigger size here in chip EV because a lot of his Queen X is going to be strong enough that it can bet, pot maybe a little bit more perhaps. And it doesn't really, benefit him that much to go for a big size here in ICM because it's harder for you to pay off. And
I still have traps in my range.
Exactly. You do still have a little bit of trapping. So when he does bet 67 here, we have basically a spot where, we're folding a huge amount. Like this is kind of one of the weird things that happens in ICM. We have spots where we don't meet MDF. We deliberately don't meet MDF. And this is one of them. We are going to have some jams. Like we have some full houses here and we have some bluff jams.
What are our bluff jams here?
Looks like Ace of Clubs 8 is a big one. Some of the other Ace 8 is actually bluffing a low frequency.
Or
and then
blocking the bottom set.
Blocking the boats, yeah. And then we've got let's try to find them. A lot of 8X with a club. Like Jack 8 with the Jack of clubs. 10-8 with the 10 of clubs, low frequency, 8-7 of spades. Just having an 8 blocker seems really important here, basically.
A king's too good to turn into a bluff, and then they're going to check back 8s on the turn.
Right,
So you just want to have the 8s. Does he have Queen 8 suited in his range?
Maybe. Yeah, he does in like half of
Right.
it.
So
yeah.
you don't want the 8 of hearts because you don't block queen 8 of, like you don't block
Yeah.
queen 8 because the queen of hearts is on the board.
Right.
So you use ace of clubs with like queen of diamonds or spades.
Yeah, eight of diamonds or spades.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the what it comes down to here is we don't have to meet MDF here, and villain is also going to probably be. Let's take a look at villain's bluffing range.
When you say we don't have to meet MDF, what do you mean exactly?
What I mean is that the solver doesn't care that much about protecting our range against villain being able to bluff a lot, because number one, villain can't like go crazy against us because we have some bluff jams anyway, and number two, because there's still a risk premium on us here, we don't. The downside of us like bluff catching with super marginal hands is bigger than the upside of actually winning the pot slightly more often, right? Okay. And there's also a lot of hands that villain has here that have decent showdown value that don't need to, that have some degree of showdown value that don't really need to bluff very much. So if you look at villain's range, the only bluffs they really have here are, actually, let's go crash hands and weak hands. Basically, some of their ace high is bluffing with, like, when they have a club, their ace high is bluffing, but a lot of their ace high is just checking back. And outside of that, it's just all their jack high and 10 high. But they don't really care about finding the right bluffing frequency here either. If you look at villain's overall range construction, only like 31% of their range is ace high or worse. And considering that they're betting 2/3 pot, you know, we're getting, help me out here, somebody. We're getting like 2.7-ish to 1. Like we're basically, they're supposed to be bluffing something like 27. Would it be 27% of the time? I'm trying to figure out pot odds on the fly. Don't do math on air. This is the shouldn't do math on air. Basically, they have 31% bluffs in their range here, which is I actually think it's a very slight overbluff for this size. But because some of those bluffs are ace high, like they're actually they're like bluffing with ace high to get us off a chop almost. And there's just not really that much incentive like for us to actually call with some of these hands that bluff catch, especially when they also block some of their bluffs. So like we're just pure folding our ace jack on the river, even though ace jack high beats bluffs. We also block enough bluffs, like they're only really bluffing with the jack tens and stuff like that. We now, you know, this hand is just worse than 0 EV as a bluff catcher.
Makes sense.
And they, you know, the nature of, because there's a risk premium on both players, like even though they are slightly over bluffing, we're still slightly over folding. And yet, even though we're slightly over folding, they're not doing crazy stuff like turning deuces into a bluff, right? They're not turning a pair into a bluff, because just checking back and winning the pot at some tiny frequency with deuces is actually better than potentially, you know, trying to turn it into a bluff. So it basically, ICM is just like keeping both players a lot more honest in this spot. Yeah. And neither player really gets to go nuts, because the downside of actually running into the top of range is greater than the upside of winning this particular pot at a slightly higher frequency. If you did look at this in chip EV, this would look exactly like any other spot where we would have, you know, we would never be folding 2/3 of the time to a 2/3 pot bet on the river, because this is like a significant overfold, right, relative to MDF. And villain would also, you know,
they would float wider on flop.
Yeah, exactly. Villain would float wider,
which is
on
why
flop.
We can't bet the flop.
Right. So like that's why we would only bet like 11% on the flop. And check this out, right? We're jamming for if we check jam, we're jamming for 2x pot almost, right? Less than 2x pot. So if we bet 2x pot, they're supposed to, theoretically, they're supposed to defend what, 40%? What's MDF for 2x pot?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, something like that. So they're only actually calling 20%. If we check jam, they're you know, basically drastically overfolding in relation to what chip EV would normally say. But even despite the fact that they're drastically overfolding, we're not just taking every single hand in our range and just check jamming it as a bluff, because ICM dictates that we have to be a bit more careful about the bluffs that we use.
Yeah, there's a big concern just running into the nuts and now not being chip leader anymore.
Exactly. So just basically the threat of running into the top and the downside of what happens when you do run into the top are significant enough that even in a situation where your opponent's folding a lot, it's still not correct to, like, they're folding 80% of the time here, but it's not correct for us to just 2x pot check jam with a bunch of random bluffs, right?
Yeah.
So ICM just keeps both players a lot more honest in that way as well. So it really transforms river spots, and I think we're really just at the beginning of understanding how a lot of these river spots function with ICM in play, and how it's, there's going to be some spots where it's correct to just like rampantly overbluff, and then it's also sometimes correct to underbluff, underfold, overfold. Like everything changes when you add ICM to the equation when it comes to these river spots. So it's really interesting, and I'm looking forward to studying it a lot more.
Oh, look at that X. Look at that X. Did you see that turn play? It was a 97% bet.
Yeah, I guess
the man got the X.
I guess he got the X.
Sure.
But yeah, what did we do in game on the river? Did we just check fold?
Yeah, I folded.
Yeah, I mean, check fold on river seems good. Like, there's no bluff catching here with any ace highs, really at all.
Yeah, his range is super honest. His
Yeah.
range checks back all the pairs and then has the bluffs of like jack high or whatever. So
Yeah.
it makes sense to not pay even though it's a reasonable enough price.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like we know he has a bunch of jack high bluffs and below, but like we're still never paying ace high.
Yeah, because he wins that pot. We still have chip lead. There's still a lot of things going on there. But
yeah,
more so when it comes like full circle to the discussion about having ICM post in the first place, making this stuff like commercial and easily accessible allows the win rate to be taken back from people that are potentially cheating to have chip lead in the first place, which playing the same strategies at final tables is costing a lot of money. So now having the access to do this very quickly is concerning for many reasons.
Yeah.
Just a matter of what ends up happening because of it. And a valid concern is like a lot of the people that call it could potentially use it for bad things, if they're working alone, would never get caught. Where the people that did get caught doing things had people kind of snitch on them, like Fedor Kruza for cash, and then the whole Ali's situation was what it was.
I mean, that all brought the fair play to light, though. So hopefully this, like the fair play, like limits a lot of that, and I hope that operators and people are just like doing their due diligence to get ahead of this.
Sure, I'm just going with the issue that the people that are cheating are always, or to a degree, would remain anonymous, and that kind of allows for some ways to get around the system and not like necessarily be ostracized from like playing live events and things along those lines, where a lot of the backlash is community wide versus like going to jail or whatever.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Like funds confiscated, like that's the worst thing that happens, so to speak.
Yeah.
Where most of the pressure is on the community to say, hey, like, yeah, this guy's a cheater. Like, we probably don't want him to be playing in these tournaments because he's a cheater.
Yeah.
And things along those lines don't really happen anymore.
I was gonna say we don't even get that really.
And then you'll never get it because the site will never give that to you and say, hey, we caught XYZ cheating and these are their names.
Yeah, I think personally that one really important thing that we need to put some energy into is actually creating formats of the game that are RTA proof. So creating elements to the game, like, I mean,
stand up tournaments. Let's go.
Right, like stand up game or some variation of it is a good example of something that even with even if you can imagine adding an element to the existing technology that's out there that we just have been exploring, it's hard to imagine how someone would create something that you could use for RTA for a stand-up game, right? So I really think we just need to start thinking about like how can we make poker itself RTA proof, not how can we get rid of RTA tools.
It's tough because once there is a new format, first to market will want to capture the new standard. Like you start adding like call it bomb pot tournaments on sites and they become super popular. Now you're gonna have like a bomb pot calculator at some point.
Sure, but what I'm talking about is having a dynamic, changing game environment, hand by hand, where maybe even there's some unknown element of the game that makes it harder to solve. Like one idea that I have that I think would be really fun is there's a dead card every single hand. Like you kill one card from the deck every single hand.
Don't they do that with the burns though?
No, but I mean
it's known what card it is.
They expose one card from the deck.
So
every
like
single
the Ace of
hand.
Diamonds is like the burn card. Like they expose the burn on
every
purpose.
single hand, there's one dead card, and you have to figure out how that's going to affect your strategy. And everybody knows that card is dead.
I don't hate that.
No,
I love that.
Or something or multiple dead cards,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
just kill 5 cards from the deck before every hand. They're exposed. Everyone knows they're out there. They're not in play. And now try to figure out your sims, you know?
Well, the issue to a degree is like, this is why online dies and why live is good, because you can't cheat to the same scale as you're doing live versus online.
Absolutely.
And then that's why, like, as not like an unironic joke, but like I was talking with Patrick about this. He's like, yeah, like you should learn some mixed games, you know? Because like playing mixed games, like this isn't really an issue, but there's no online market anymore for mixed games. It's just more like series time and new series that pop up.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we want ideally is we want to create something. We want to create a format that is still No Limit Hold'em, because No Limit Hold'em's a really beautiful game. We all love it, but I think that there are elements that we can come up with. There are ways that we can figure out that would add stuff to the game, that would make it fun, that would keep it interesting, and that would at the same time make it a lot harder for RTA to actually be used. And the killing 1 card thing is like my personal favorite idea that I've come up with.
I think that's actually doable in like online tournaments and stuff like that.
I would love it.
Like, I think for like live stuff, stand-up game would be huge. Where you just have to lose a certain amount of big blinds. That would be so fucking cool. Savage, get after it.
Or like maybe at like every hand, the player on the button gets to choose a card to kill. Like you can kill an ace or you can kill a deuce. You know, it's the player on the button chooses. Whatever.
Before you look at your cards or after?
Oh, I don't know.
Before the flop or
I
after?
didn't even think of that. But like if you think of simple elements you can add to the game that make it more fun, but also fuck with the RTA usage, like that, I just think is something we should at least experiment with, because it destroys everything. Like, as soon as you make the game different to where the sims that you can get from RTA are now useless, now what's the point in cheating?
I mean,
right?
not only that, it just makes it fun.
Yeah.
Go look at like any of these games. I've been playing the Absolute Nut game sometime, and it's like 5-5, and it's just like we play all these stupid games, carnival games, 7 deuce. If somebody folds, all right, this is my favorite. All right, I hate it, but it's my favorite. If somebody folds pre-flop, like say I fold under the gun, and everybody else calls, that person that folds owes everybody that's around $5.
Wow.
The dealer, the waitresses, anybody that's around, the camera guy, because they kind of scream it.
That's funny.
It's fucking hilarious. And the worst part about it, collusion is encouraged in this game.
Oh, wow.
So the second that person folds, they're like, it's called Tana. So like, Tana. And you just feel like you're about to die. And everybody's like, it's wild, because like you'll see somebody in the small blind and they're just looking around at the table and they're like, I'm gonna fuck this guy. Call 5. Then he ends up showing like 10s at the end. You're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
This is absurd. But
that's funny.
On that note, thank you for rocking with us today, Hunt. Really appreciate that.
Happy to be here.
We will be back tomorrow at noon. Berkey might be with us, probably. But tonight at 6 p.m., we will be down at the Venetian, getting it popping for the meetup game. So come on and join us. Thanks for rocking with us. We're out.
Peace.
Peace.